Fantastic. So obviously, I'm sure you've heard the news about Charlie Kirk being viciously killed yesterday. And in light of that, a lot of people have taken to social media sharing their opinions about it. He was a polarizing figure, so some people feel differently about his death. And so a lot of people have taken to social media, as I said, and today we've seen multiple people who've been fired from their jobs as a result of their comments about Charlie Kirk. One being a Carolina Panthers social media person. He was fired for comments that he made on his personal Instagram account. There was an MSNBC political commentator who was fired for things that he said on air about this. So I was hoping to speak to an attorney just about, what is the, legality behind these terminations? What are workers' rights? What are employers' rights when it comes to, deciding what's unacceptable for their employees to post online? So would you be able to tell me, we're hearing that as an attorney, what are your thoughts on these terminations?
So I can't comment on the particulars of any termination, but I will tell you that in North Carolina, most employees are at will. And that means that your employer can fire you at any time for any reason or no reason, right? So, you expressing any opinion on social media that doesn't align with your company in general, there's not going to be any recourse for a termination. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions. They're pretty narrow, but there are definitely some exceptions.
And what would you say is like the best practice for, employees like myself when it comes to what I put on my personal social media account? Is it safe just to not post controversial things at all? Would it be better to, have a private account where, not everyone has access to what you post? What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we often advise our clients that the best course of action is to be very careful about what you put out online. Saying nothing is probably the best policy. But obviously, you can post whatever you'd like on social media. Just have to understand that there could be consequences from your employer if that doesn't align with your employer's values.
And just so I'm clear, sorry, my photographer's getting in the car if you hear some rumbling around. But just for like my thoughts are, like I have a contract that I signed with my job, and it has, things that are written in it. There are clauses about like what you can and can't do, especially being a job where like you're on TV, you're like representing the brand. So when it comes to like signing these contracts, even if it's not in my contract, the employer has the right to terminate you based off of what you post, even if it's not written out.
No, it's a great question because employees with contracts with their employers can be one of those exceptions. Now, not always, right? But if you have a contract that alters that at will status, that can offer you some opportunities. So if you have a contract, for example, that alters that at will status and provides only certain circumstances in which you could be terminated, and that is not listed, then you may have a cause of action. For the most part, I will say most employees, even if you have a contract, you're going to have still be in that at will category. And it doesn't necessarily need to provide specifically, set out that you can't say certain things on your social media for them to terminate you when you are at will.
You mentioned the laws here in North Carolina. How does this state differ than other states? I'm not sure where all you're knowledgeable about, but is North Carolina different than other places around the country when it comes to that?
Yeah, so I actually practice in both North and South Carolina, and they're pretty similar in that respect. There are definitely some other laws in other states that I couldn't speak to in particular, but it's certainly the case that the landscape in each state is going to be fairly different, and there may be some states where that's not the case.
And finally, while we're putting the story together tonight, is there anything that you think is important that I include, or anything that you think is important that I should let people know when we're informing them about what they're posting on social media and to be aware of?
I would say just be very conscious of what you're putting on your social media. Be aware that your employer is likely watching. And, the best course of action is to, remain private. And when I say remain private, I mean, don't post things publicly on the internet that might, upset your employment. Now, of course, you have the right to do that, but it's important that you understand that there are potential consequences for your employment.